bright and diverse voices in integrative mind-body practice. YouTube viewers, please subscribe. It tells YouTube this content is valuable, and then they'll show it to more people. Thanks, everyone, for joining us for the final session of Trauma 101. Today's session is called Triggers, Window of Capacity, and Upregulation, Downregulation Skills. Please feel free to drop your questions in the chat. We'll have a little time at the end for Q&A, and we'll do our best to get to all of them. And I want everyone to know that the slides Linda has been presenting this series will be available in the TRF Tuesday Somatic Library. It's available under the Resources tab on the TRF website. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce to you our presenter. Linda Tai is a trauma therapist who specializes in cutting-edge brain and body-based modalities for the healing of complex developmental trauma. As an educator and consultant, she is gifted with the capacity to contextualize, synthesize, and communicate complex and nuanced issues pertaining to the impact of oppressive systems upon identity, mental health and well-being, and the invisibilized wounds of racial trauma. Linda is passionate about breaking the cycle of historical and intergenerational trauma at the individual and community levels, and deeply believes in the healing power of coming together in community to grieve. Born in Vietnam, raised in Australia, and now living in Alaska, Linda is a former child refugee who is not only redefining what it means to be Vietnamese, to be Australian, and to be United Statesian. She is redefining what it means to be wounded and whole and a healer. Linda, thanks so much for being here. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Mary, and thank you everyone for such a warm welcome into this space every week. It's so important, you know, the practice of welcoming and being welcomed. So before I start with the slide sharing for today, I want to share with you a somatic practice that I use. I use it whenever my nervous system feels a little bit up, or perhaps a lot up. It's the practice that I share with my clients, whether it's individual or dyads or family groups or groups, where we're coming towards the end of our time together, and yet there's a lot of activity in the nervous systems in the space. There's a lot of emotions that may be up, and I want people to leave the space without feeling that sense of upness. And so I learnt this from David Moran on the weekend, a couple of weekends ago. So if you like, you can try this on with us, and if you don't want to, you don't have to either. You can sit and watch. And if at any point in time this feels not okay with you, then please, you know, you can not. Yeah. So he calls it the rain exercise. So you're outside and it's raining. It's raining really hard. So you run inside. And then when you get inside, you close the door and you sit down, and you can hear how loud the rain is. It's so loud, you can barely hear yourself. And then after some time, the rain becomes not so loud. It's almost like raindrops on a tin roof. And you notice yourself listening to the raindrops on the tin roof. The rain begins to diminish some more, becomes drizzle. And you hear the drizzling of the light rain. Now, my favorite part of when rain becomes drizzle is going outside to look for the rainbow. And so if you like, you can come outside with me. And looking for the rainbow means we're orienting towards the sky, and you can feel the rain drizzle. It's gently tapping on your face and on your head and on your face as you look around for the rainbow. And then you see the rainbow. And you know what happens when we see rainbows? We want to trace the rainbow with our hands. So if you like, you can reach across your body with one hand and then trace the rainbow. And then reach across your body with the other hand. Trace the rainbow. Reach once again. If you like, you might have a paintbrush that you put into your imaginary paint pot. Trace the rainbow. And perhaps switch the paintbrush to the other hand. Trace the rainbow again. And then after you've finished tracing the rainbow, take a pause to have a look around, to take in the smells that happen after a fresh rain, to hear for the songbirds, and to see. The freshness that a fresh rain brings. Yeah. So that's the rain. I added the rainbow part, but it's the bilateral stimulation. Yeah. And we're also titrating in listening. We're titrating in the lengthening of the spine. We're titrating in crossing the midline of the body. And I find with a lot of the groups that I do, when the emotion is up here, you know, it's something that we do regularly enough that I don't need to explain the science behind why. And yet for you in this space, I feel that that's something that you're very curious about, because we tend to attract curious folks. So allow your body to shift and move and do whatever it needs to do as we start to orient towards learning about triggers and window of capacity and nervous system upregulation and downregulation skills. So this is where we have been the last few weeks, recognizing that trauma takes us outside of the window. And when we're outside of the window, we're in actions of protection in service of survival, or we're in resource conservation in service of survival. And when we're outside the window, we're in a dissociated state. And what this means is that memories of the traumatic experience, or the experience that has overwhelmed the nervous system, whether it's acute or persistent, is outside of our conscious awareness, outside of our ability to name for someone else. And so what happens with somatic psychotherapies is we're soliciting implicit body memories. And so what this can look like is, as you stay with this, what colors come up, or what sights come up, what sounds come up, what can you smell? Are there any tastes? Is there a sense of pressure or touch? You know, is there a sense of energy around or inside the body? Is there an urge or a movement impulse? Are there connections that are forming and you want to say or do something and it's outside of your conscious explicit awareness? Perhaps there are images that start to flash, start to emerge. Perhaps memories of the past come rushing forward. Perhaps emotions that are associated with that particular experience start to erupt. And then lastly, what did you make that mean about yourself and about others and about the world around you? And so with somatic psychotherapies, there's a richness there in soliciting the wisdom that's held in the body. And yet when there has been a trauma history, we need to be careful, right? Without fragilizing our clients, we need to be careful about the pace at which we begin to move towards the ways in which memories have become encoded into the sensory systems and into the somatic systems of the body. And so when psychologists speak about the unconscious, it's the body that they're talking about, the wisdom, the richness, the untold stories, or the stories that we haven't yet learned how to receive, how to listen to. Now, what I'm about to share with you next is, there's a content warning. I will make a referral to gun violence, and it's a way, and it's framed within how traumatic memories become encoded. Yeah. In essence, trauma is overcoupling of somatosensory imprints. So think of it as Pavlovian conditioning and imprinting. Yeah. I ring a bell, I bring food to the dog salivates and eats the food. Yeah. After a while, we don't need to bring the food. As soon as the bell rings, the dog knows that the food is going to come and start salivating. Yeah. And so trauma is an overcoupling of imprints that happen sensorially. Yeah, sensorially. So sight, sound, smells, visceral sensations in the body. And this is why for so many of us, as an adaptive strategy, we learn to dissociate and to disconnect from the body when there is this sensory overwhelm. And because emotions are simply physical sensations, if no one is there for us in the aftermath of an emotionally or physically overwhelming experience, then these experiences don't get integrated. And so they stay as unintegrated fragments, sensory fragments. I like to think of this as hashtags. And I want to thank my colleague, Danielle Burke, for sharing with me the analogy of hashtags as a way of conceptualizing how trauma gets imprinted. So as we go into the next piece of content, you can orient away from the screen. You can choose to not watch this next part or choose to watch it in stages. When you see me do this, it means that there will be no more mention or images of guns or gun violence. Mm-hmm. So we've got our somatic elicitations up the top here. You go to the cinemas. And what typically happens as we move through the world, move through life, including going to the cinemas, is the brain processes all of this information. You know, we observe, we take in the input information as well as sensorily. We through experience, know what information is important and what is not important, which information to ignore. Yeah. We interpret that information, we process it, we evaluate our options, we make a plan, and then we take action. Let's go to the movies on Friday night to see the next action movie, and let's invite so-and-so. Yeah, we make a plan, we take action. And so we have additional experiences in life that become a part of the experience of going to the cinemas. And they become encoded together as hashtags. So hashtag cinema, it gets filed in the filing system, like in social media, with hashtag sodas, hashtag action movies, hashtag Friday nights, hashtag popcorn, hashtag the smell of butter, hashtag candy, hashtag fun, hashtag friends. What happens when an unpleasant experience then arises? In service of survival, the brain says observe, interpret, and we see there's a danger. And the danger response means in service of survival, we do not process, evaluate options or plan. We go straight into action because our life depends upon it. And then with an extreme event that's overwhelmingly stressful, any hashtag that is associated with that extreme event then causes us to go straight into action. And this can also happen with repeated smaller events or any sort of repeated trauma over time. Our brain then becomes hypervigilant towards noticing shifts, noticing negativity, noticing changes that have become hashtagged in with these experiences that we don't wish to experience again. So if we go back a few weeks, what causes stress? Not enough information or lack of information, lack of transparency, lack of agency, lack of choice, lack of voice, lack of dignity. And for some of us, they have become hashtagged as the things that happened before something prolongingly stressful or acutely stressful happened. And so trauma is the overcoupling of somatosensory input. Hashtag movies becomes overcoupled with hashtag gun violence. And so hashtag popcorn, hashtag butter, hashtag candy, hashtag soda, hashtag fun, hashtag Marvel movies, for example, hashtag friends, hashtag the dark, hashtag on my hands and knees, hashtag gunpowder, hashtag gunfire, hashtag loud sudden sounds, hashtag screaming, hashtag people everywhere, hashtag loud breathing, hashtag disoriented, hashtag where is the threat, hashtag where is the exit, hashtag I can't breathe, hashtag I want my mother. Breath. And I'm going to stop the screen share just here and attend to the space. And so if you like, we can come running inside from the rain, and maybe there's no running that's available, so we're just doing a little bit of penguin waddling. And then if you like, the sound of the rain. And then if you like, the rain becomes softer. And then you're listening for the sound of the rain as it changes. And the sound of the rain becomes even softer as it becomes drizzle-like. And then if you like, you may wish to foray outside to look for the rainbow. And you can feel the rain softly drizzling on your face and on your hair. And you notice the rainbow and you want to reach from one end of the rainbow to the other, to reach with the other hand from one hand of the rainbow to the other. Feeling free, if you like, to continue to wiggle your fingertips fast, seeing if you can touch the rainbow. Yeah. And so this is how memories become encoded into our memory system. And so this explains why for some of us, we can be living in a state of hypervigilance or avoidance around benign stimulus for other people, such as butter, soda, the dark. Yeah. And the brain may say, but I'm safe now. But our body, in service of survival, is orienting to that as a cue of unsafety, or actually as a cue of danger. Yeah, as a cue of danger. My apologies. Mm-hmm. And so this is what happens with traumatic stress in the nervous system. Time has passed and the nervous system activates and settles. And yet what happens with a traumatic event is it dysregulates the nervous system in service of survival. Our nervous system is stuck on or stuck on off. And in that moment, back then, we needed to run away or cry out or freeze or feign death. And yet after the moment has passed, the nervous system may be experiencing the aftermath. And this can be experienced as hypervigilance, hypersensitivity, avoidance, intrusive thoughts, re-experiencing, reenacting, as well as the vehement emotions, panic, anxiety, fear, rage, terror. And we can also experience these emotions as emotions that we would do anything to not experience ever again. And the converse may be applicable. The nervous system may be in hyposensitivity, numb, shut down, no energy, hopelessness, helplessness, futility, impotence, shame, despair, or defeat. And or these may be sensations or emotions or felt senses in the body that we would do anything to not experience ever again. And even after the traumatic event has passed, the nervous system may perhaps return and settle. And yet a hashtag, a trauma-related stimulus may emerge in the environment. And the nervous system in service of survival says, I know what happened the last time this happened. Dr. Janina Fisher says that trauma survivors don't have memories, we have symptoms. Yeah. And so by beginning to recognize that it's about what happened to you, or perhaps what happened to your people, or perhaps what continues to happen to you and your people, we can shift away from that felt sense of what's wrong with me. Mm-hmm. And so when we start to pull this information forward, we look at the window of capacity, which is also known as the window of tolerance or window of arousal. And let's get rid of the fancy nervous system terms on the left-hand side. And we'll just call this space above the line too much energy. And that's where there's the fidgeting, anxiety, irritation, frustration. It's how I know when I'm at the very edges of my window, at the upper edge. And when I cross a threshold, I'm in survival mode. That's that fight, flight, freeze. Yeah, the hypersensitivity, hypervigilance. I perceive everything as a threat, as a danger. Yeah. And then at the lower edge of the window is too little energy. The lights are on, but no one's home. It's all too much anyway. Why bother? And when I'm on the outside of the window entirely, I'm in survival mode, where I'm in the flaccid immobility of the possum that has just been chased down by a coyote. And that flaccid immobility is to make imminent death less unpleasant. And the reason I share this window of capacity with my clients is that by having a map, you know where you are on your nervous system terrain. And the state of our nervous system gives rise to what happens in our body, in our emotions, and in our thoughts. And the state of our nervous system drives our story about the world. And then once I'm into the story of my world, that then further reinforces the nervous system state that I'm in. I often get asked, what's this optimal energy state in the middle? What's that about? This is the experience of safe and social and engaged. And I often like to use the words relatively safe with relative social connection and relative engagement, where I can think and feel simultaneously without overwhelm. My capacity for self-reflection and perspective taking is online, as well as capacities for patience, empathy, compassion, connection for self and for others simultaneously without feeling overwhelmed, and capacities for curiosity, wonder, awe, and imagination. And yet the challenge for some of us is that when there has been action in anxiety, panic, rage, fear, or terror, when there has been action because the anxiety is driving it, so I don't leave the window, then it can be a challenge to experience safety in action, let alone safety in connection in action. And so this is where my veterans really appreciate veteran motorcycle clubs and whitewater rafting groups. Yeah, it creates a space for relative safety and relative connection in action. And for some of us, when there has been terror or defeat in stillness, it can be a real challenge to experience safety in stillness, let alone safety in connection in stillness. Yeah. And so that's where we have that invitation based on our nervous system and the impact of trauma on our nervous system to perhaps create groups where we come together with autonomically low activation experiences, painting, reading, doodling, being with others without perhaps the imperative to interact. Because for some of us, that can be too much for our nervous systems. Yeah. And so part of learning about the window of capacity is to get to know your nervous system, not to pathologize it, so that you can then begin to recognize where is more familiar for you on this nervous system map. So for example, my veterans prefer to live up here. That's where they feel most comfortable. Stillness is unsafe for them. I have other clients where their nervous system in service of survival lives down here on the map, and action feels treacherous for them. Yeah. And yet learning about your body's adaptations to trauma can help us to meet ourselves where we're at and to find and forge communities where we can begin to experience that nervous system resonance so that we can begin to work through in our own time what has happened to us without perhaps ever needing to talk about it. Yeah. So I just want to pause there. And to also name that the nervous system's skills of learning how to nervous system downregulate as well as nervous system upregulate, can be some of the key skills that we learn at the start of trauma therapy, because it is painful to not be in control of what your nervous system perceives to be safe, unsafe, or dangerous. Yeah. And so that's where I invite you to tap into your resources that have gotten you thus far, and to continue to do the me search and the we search and the research that allows you to reclaim the risk that's inherent in the dignity of risking being alive. Mm-hmm. And for Leah, who asks, can patients be on this window without the cause rooted in trauma? I say absolutely. I share this with my clients who are in early addiction recovery, and their nervous system is all over the place because they're not able to use the thing that they used to use in the past in order to regulate or calm or soothe the nervous system. Clients with ADHD, with sensory processing overwhelm, sensory seeking behaviors. This is a way of noticing when you've just had too much stimulus for the day and you're getting into that agitation, frustration, irritation. And you're at the edge of your window. And unless you're able to tap into resource, then your nervous system is going to go into the I'm overwhelmed and I'm going to withdraw in order to take care of myself. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Linda, thank you. We are a bit over time, but there's a couple of questions if it's all right. Lily is asking, she says she has a client who feels and appears in hyper arousal as a baseline, but has thoughts that are indicative of hypoarousal. Is this disorganized attachment?
Not necessarily. It can be and not necessarily. I've noticed in some of the trainings that I've taken in yoga therapy, right, you can have an anxious mind and a depressed body. Right? You can have an anxious body and have a depressed thoughts and feelings. Yeah, there can be, and one is trying to resource the other potentially. Yeah, and so that's where you're being able to work with. So for that client that you mentioned, I would suggest the contralateral movements that we did last week, as well as the vestibular system engagement combined with the contralateral, which will then bring some balance between the anxiety and the depression, or the anxious part and the depressed part, or the up part and the overwhelmed part. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can we take one more question? It's not a quick question, but if you have some quick tips on how to come back into the optimal part of the window in the moment.
Yes, in the moment. I like to do the bilateral tapping, whether it's the slowness of the butterfly tap, or if it's more faster tapping. I like to orient. So if we go back to that slide of how the nervous system neurocepts threat and danger, right? Orienting. Notice the route between you and your exits, and notice where your exits are. Orient towards the horizon by looking through the window or the imaginary window, and notice the space behind you, the space behind you in the other direction, the space above you. And then begin to take up some space. Because as we begin to take up space, our nervous system is being given the cues by our body that it's okay to take up space in the world. But we do it slowly.
That's really...
taking up space and making sounds. Because in an animal that is unsafe in nature becomes still and becomes quiet.
That's really helpful. I'm sorry we can't get to all the questions, but Linda, thank you so much for this series. I think this is one we'll all go back to again and again to continue to digest. Thank you for presenting it in such a way that's been engaging, but also very accessible. Thank you to our audience. We're so happy to have you, whether you're new or you're already a part of our community. And for everyone, you'll find past sessions in the TRF Tuesday library. It's on our website under the resources tab. You can find all of Linda's previous sessions. Behind the scenes, our team members, Pat Murray, Connor McCann, and our alternate TRF Tuesday host, Star Mohammed. I'm Mary Frangie. Thanks, everyone. We look forward to seeing you next time. Bye, everyone.